Hello and welcome to the Abel Contemporary Gallery. I'm Theresa Abel, and I am extremely pleased to be here with Delores Fortuna. We are here to talk about her current show called Sticks and Stones, and it's all new work that she's done in her new home, at her new studio. We're going to talk about that. So thank you everyone for being here, and let's talk. Oh, first, what I want to do is, for people, I think the audience here is familiar with you, but for people who might be watching the recording, I'm going to read a little bit about you.
Okay, good.
Delores Fortuna studied at the University of Chicago for both her undergraduate and graduate degrees in ceramics. She credits studying with Ruth Duckworth at the University of Chicago for her undergraduate and graduate degrees, and Richard Lefine, is that how you pronounce that? As pivotal in developing her wheel-throwing touch. After receiving her formal education, she continued on to teach at Antioch University, St. Xavier University, Chicago, and the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, before retiring in 2015 and transitioning to a full-time studio practice. Her work is featured in both national and international exhibitions, numerous publications, and is a staple in collections across the nation. We're so glad you're here.
Well, I'm very happy and very pleased to be here, especially with the weather cooperating.
I know, right? It was supposed to snow and the sun is out. And you've been with the gallery for so long now. I feel like you're so important to us here, and it's just such a pleasure to work with you.
Well, you know what I really enjoy about your gallery is that vessel work is not that difficult to find representation for, but you've allowed me to explore a lot of these themes, especially my kind of fascination with form and line, in not the traditional wheel-thrown vessel. So when we were at Paoli, I had a show there that really explored alternative media.
Yeah.
Which I really enjoyed, and I think you offer a lot, an opportunity for a lot of artists who have a material consciousness, but want to kind of push the bounds of how they're expressing it, the opportunity to do that.
Right.
And it's really a hard thing to find, and the only places that I've been able to really show that work are in more academic settings.
Right.
Where, where you can find an audience for work that has, no intent except expressing an idea.
Yeah. Now I still, I have a piece from that show.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's actually a question that leads into something. I was thinking about we had dinner last night, which was lovely, and we were having conversations, and I realize I interview a lot of artists, and whatever media an artist works with, whether they're painting or they're blowing glass or working in wood or clay, there's a certain sensibility that the creative mind has. And you have it in spades, like the way that you look at the world, the way that you approach making art, the things that you might say about that could be valid to any kind of media. And I assume you've always had that way of thinking and viewing the world, and I'm just wondering how it was that you chose clay. You could be a painter, you could do anything.
And I did do all those things.
Oh.
And when I was in college, the great thing about the art program at the University of Chicago is that it wasn't really studio focused. So it was under the auspices of the art history program, which is incredibly excellent at the University of Chicago. And so I actually took in my undergrad and graduate degrees much more art history classes than I ever took studio practice classes. And so we were talking about medieval art.
Yes.
Wonderful professor Herbert Kessler, and modern art, Renaissance art, and all of these people are really were well known back then in their fields. So I think there was a real visual foundation of that I think is really important to an artist. I think it really builds a deep well, both in historical art and contemporary art.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of printmaking. I did a lot of drawing. My drawing teacher was Harold Hayden, who was a critic for the Chicago, I think the Sun-Times at the time. And so I did a lot of hand and brushwork.
Okay.
So I happened to take a ceramics class, and I think it was that moment where it kind of was a synergy of all these things for me coming together.
Okay.
So I could do the drawing. I could do the feeling of color that I've always enjoyed in my painting. And he kind of pulled them all together in the sense of form. The thing that was happening is that I think I took my first ceramics class in 1968. And at that time, Danish ceramics was coming into the United States. And the magazine that we all looked at was Craft Horizon or Ceramics Monthly.
Mm-hmm.
And there were these incredible photographs of Danish ceramics. And they were just, it was like the ceramics world was a world on fire.
Yeah.
It was the thing that was really happening. And I had a really interest in, Bill and I, while I was teaching at the Art Institute, we did a lot of symposiums. We were invited to a lot of gatherings in Europe. And we were in Helsinki one summer, and they had a wonderful museum there of contemporary art, contemporary design. And I walked in there and I thought, oh my God, these are the pieces that I saw in 1970 in Ceramics Monthly in the museum. And do you know how you scale things? If I showed you a slide, something this big, if it's proportionally right on, you would think it was this big.
Yeah.
And so I would go in, and I had put a scale and associated craftsmanship to the scale of these objects. And so some of the objects I was so mesmerized were only this large.
Oh.
But I thought they were like this.
Yeah.
And I thought, how can anybody do that? You know? And so part of that was wanting to be that. I thought, well, I am going to, take my skills up to the level that I can do that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to go back to Richard Lafine, because working with Ruth, I was mainly a hand builder. And, and that's a certain way of handling clay and approaching clay. And my graduate show was all hand built. And so my first teaching job at Antioch College, they said, of course, to all new hires, well, you're going to be teaching wheel classes. Like, really? I don't throw. And he said, no, you have the summer to learn how to throw.
Wow.
And so Richard Lafine had studied in Japan for a long time. Ruth was more a trimmer than a thrower.
Okay.
So she would just block in these forms, and then she would just trim them out. And so that's, if I worked on the wheel, that's how it worked. And so it's the sense of the form being really a silhouette.
Yeah.
And so when I worked with Richard Lafine, he saw the vessel form the wall as a membrane. And so he felt that the real magic in a form was how you used your inside hand. And it should be revealed through. So he really saw everything as a skin. And it's a totally different way of throwing, because your inside hand is much more active. It's not a volume that has no resonance. So the way I throw is very thin.
Mm-hmm.
And I sometimes have to force myself, especially when I was doing these, to leave more clay in the bottom.
Oh.
So my idea of form is to throw the whole form, not to trim the form into a silhouette.
Got it.
So what I want is a real vibrancy and a sense of the inner space being very, very active,
right,
and apparent in my vessel forms. So I love to throw molds for that reason, because I really love to get that sweep of the inside hand and, that kind of coordination or relationship between the two of them.
No, and it's interesting because, there's, sometimes it seems like a bowl is beautiful on the inside, but, it's just it's just the inside, right? People are almost anticipating it's going to be covered with food or, It's not always the most exciting part, but your bowls are stunning on the inside and the outside, and they're really dynamic, and it's like it's a whole other landscape, a whole other world going on in there.
Right, I've always had that feeling, and this kind of goes back, Stephen Kamenethi's work, we're talking about him a little bit, and another person who really influenced me when I was beginning was Wayne Higby. And so you may have some of his work in your collection, I don't know. But he now teaches at Alfred. He's taught there for a long time. But when he was first getting started, he kind of went around and did a lot of workshops. And again, in his form, he has that whole feeling of landscape.
Yeah.
And I've always really embraced that, even though, through all the kind of changes of configuration of my work. So if you look across, the relationship of one wall to another should be saying something. So I see my work as not one view, but an object that's kind of on a turntable in your mind. So if you pick up that's why I like to make kind of handleless cups, because every time you approach it, you're going to pick it up differently.
Oh, yeah.
And it's going to give you a different sensation.
Right.
Because I don't want, I kind of really like kind of that nuance to happen from all sides.
Well, and it keeps you're super present with it whenever you're using it then, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other big influence on my work, and it took me like probably 50 years to really become comfortable talking about it, is I had polio when I was 14 months old. And I didn't walk until I was 16 without my leg braces. And I'm kind of really crooked, and what's it, the Alexander method or something, Pilates? So I pivot, so my hips are not lined up with my shoulders. And I had really bad scoliosis when I was a kid because my hip always dislocated. So I was like a C, I was bent over, so my rib cage touched my right hip until my last operation.
Wow.
So physically, I just was really messed up. And when I was working with Ruth, all my work was really wonky. And I look back at the slides from my graduate work, and I'm going and a lot of it is figures that are emerging from blocks. And when I look back at it, I thought, God, this is really emotional to me, because I was just doing this work without really being able to express intent.
Yeah.
And all these figures they're female bodies, and they're kind of wonky, they're not lined up, but they're coming out of these geometric blocks. And I think part of that was when I was a kid in my big operations, I was in a body cast.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if you know what a body cast is, but it's from your toes to below your leg, and you're basically like buried in that. First time I was ever in a body cast, I was like 9 or 10 years old.
Yeah.
And I woke up from this operation, I felt I had been buried alive. And so I think a lot of times in our work, we're kind of expressing very personal experiences that we've never really were able to verbalize.
Right.
And so maybe 6 years ago, I get notices, my name Delores Fortuna. People think I'm Latina. So I get invited to a Latin show. And so I got this notice when I was a kid, I was at the Sister Kenny's Institute in Minneapolis for about a year and a half.
Okay. And what's that? What is this?
That was a rehab institute that was a German nun. And she believed in very aggressive physical therapy for people who had polio.
Yeah, polio, okay.
So it was hot packs, physical therapy, and I think that probably was, for me, life-changing.
Yeah.
At that time. And so, where was I going with this? Well, anyway, so I got Sister Kenny. Somehow my name came up again because it's now part of the Mayo system.
Okay.
And they do a show called The Art of Possibilities. It's for people with disabilities.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, well, this is like the Latina invitation. That doesn't relate to me. Okay. I don't have any disabilities.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, maybe I'm not really being honest with myself.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what, I'm going to enter a piece in the show.
Oh.
Because, I now have a disabled license plate. I'm thinking, maybe I'm really disabled, right? And so I enter a piece in the show, and then you have to write an artist statement about how your disability affected your life and influences your art.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, wow, this is really a challenge. Because I've always written artist statements as if I was just like all of you. You know, I was in my head, I was doing this. My influences come from my teachers. And I thought, maybe I really have to unpack this and dig a little deeper. Maybe it's like, you know, they talk about hitting memory, hitting pain, etc. And so I started to think about it, and I thought, you know, like your first question, like, what made you go to clay? And then when I took those wheel throwing classes with Richard Lafine and really was using my hands and feeling the clay move with me, almost it would be like a musician playing an instrument. Yeah. It would be like someone playing the oboe or the violin. And I thought, you know, that is really the moment for me because I never run. I've never jumped. I thought the only time I've ever experienced freedom from this body is when I swim. And I love to swim. And I realized why I totally switched over and became really bonded to throwing on the wheel was just feeling the clay move under my hands gave me that feeling that I never had in terms of freedom from my body to experience movement. So I was experiencing movement through my hands that I could never experience through my total body. Yeah. And I thought, you know, that's it. You know, why do you become bonded to a material? Right. And a method of working. Yeah. And I realized that was really the moment for me that I, you know, kind of unpacked that clay for me, and especially throwing on the wheel, really became something when I sit down to do it is so refreshing. And kind of, it just really feeds me. And I think that's why I like to throw my forms very expressively. You know, I like to show a lot of movement and openness and gesture in my work. And so I think a lot of it comes from that source of unpacking.
Well, and so it's interesting because I've known you for quite a long time now. And
do you really though?
I know, right? I've learned some things about you. Like you are so tough. You just, you know, you carry your work in, like you don't seem, it seems as if what you are articulating, and it's how you present to people, that there's no disability.
Well, you know, I think that was a great thing about growing up on a farm.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because you said last night that you have sisters, and that your father just treated you all like, that you could do anything, right? That you could, you know, not like, you know, these are the boys and they do this, and these are the girls on the farm and they do this. Did your parents also, after the polio, just sort of help you realize that you could just do whatever? Did they treat you like you could do whatever you wanted to?
Yeah. You know, the interesting thing, I grew up on a family dairy farm in northern Wisconsin, and my dad said it was the curse of his life to have 4 daughters. You know, and so when he had to, and this is one thing I think I was telling you this last night. We, you know, was rebuilding his hay wagons. You know, my oldest sister would get the drill, I would get the hammer, and we would just, and he would just tell and supervise us, you know, building a whole new hay wagon off of the base of the wheels. And this is another thing I really remember from my childhood is, so we, you know, our family, we had a big garden. Yeah. And so we each kids had a row to weed. And so my mother would put a gunny sack or a feed sack on the ground because I couldn't bend over. And I would have to pull myself on this gunny sack the whole row, and I had to read my row too. Wow. So I wasn't treated any differently. The only thing I never had to do was to milk cows. Okay. Because my dad was afraid that if the cow kicked me, it would cost him too much money. So he was like, but you know, my sisters had to wake up in the morning and milk cows before, and that was pretty typical before they went to school. Yeah. So that was, you know, farm life. Right, yeah. So anyway, this farm is wonderful. You guys should come up with it.
Yeah. Well, so that's the other thing I really wanted to talk about. So was it last year you moved in?
It took me a long time. Bill passed away about 3 years ago.
Okay.
And I knew this was my plan, and I
Bill, her partner for
my partner, Bill
decades, who's
So we
a
lived
wonderful
in Galena, and had a
artist.
studio in Galena, and I think many of you came to visit us there. It's a wonderful studio. They had wood kiln and all these, like accoutrements, and they had a pretty great ceramics operation. But I knew that his children would inherit the property, and I also, when my parents were passing away, my parents asked all of us what we wanted. So I have sisters in California and Montana. And I said, I would really like to keep the homestead in our family because I love this property. And I love the rocks and the trees, and it's got a natural wetland system going through it, all the ponds and the birds and the wildlife and everything. So that's what I asked for, that was 80 acres. So, back at the turn of the century, a family could make a living on 80 acres of land. I don't think you can do that now, unless you're very specialized. And so all my sisters wanted money, which makes sense. They live far away. And so my dad has always been interested in conservation. So the rest of the land, so he had about 400 acres. The state of Wisconsin wanted to buy it because of the wetland system, and there's a natural, Mooseer Creek, there's a natural trout stream that flows through it.
Oh, okay.
And they wanted to attach it to the state forest.
Oh, good.
And so what they did is they bought that land. And it also had an Indian village on it, not Indian mounds, but a real Indian presence.
Right.
So, and that money then was divided between my sisters.
Got it.
So anyway, so this kind of was in limbo for a long time, for maybe about 10 years. My dad died next after my mother. And I kept thinking, what am I going to do with this? And so I got up there after Bill passed away, and I thought, now I have to really develop a plan. And so the barn is like 60 by 30. It's what they call a round barn, which is like an upside down ship. And when we were kids, we would go up there and just lay on our backs and listen to it. It's like a musical instrument when the wind goes through it. It's, the breeze blows through it, and the foundation is really wonderful. It's all this glacial rubble. So my farm is located right off of Highway 8 in northern Wisconsin, and there's a glacier that ended there. So glaciers are like big snowplows. So in my garden, I find the incredible variety of rocks because there used to be a volcano. So I found lava. I found a copper extruded ingot that has feldspar. So there's a lot of copper up in northern Wisconsin. So when I dig and I garden, I'm like, wow, what am I going to find today? And so part of it is that because of the glacier ending there, there's a real there's just such a variety of rocks. Yeah. And it's just wonderful to explore them and look at them and try and understand what they're all about.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
But the other thing I find interesting is, so when is the last time you lived in that house?
The farmhouse was built by my grandfather, who was a coal miner.
Okay.
And he was injured in a coal mining accident in Pennsylvania. And there's a real interesting history in that area because from that area there was a Polish priest, and he would go to the coal mines in Pennsylvania and recruit Polish people to settle in that little area of Weyerhaeuser in northern Wisconsin.
Okay.
So when I was...
Because it was a Polish community?
It was a Polish community, and so my grandfather bought that farm after a coal mining accident because he couldn't mine coal anymore.
Okay. And was he able to farm?
Well, not really.
Not really.
And so, he did it, he made it work, and it's really interesting because in that house, it's interesting to live in a multi-generational house because in a way it was really like my own anthropology project.
Yeah.
So as I renovated it and cleaned it out, I discovered these letters from Poland between and I had to find someone to translate them because they were in archaic Polish. And all the bank records, and just realizing, like one year my grandfather had to pay the taxes during the Depression, and interest rates during the Depression were really high. They were like 20-25%. And he had to go to the bank, because again, people know credit cards, know this, to borrow like $52. Can you imagine the poverty that you would have? That you would have to borrow $52 at 25% interest to pay your taxes?
Wow.
So to me, it's really, and I found a lot of records for the purchase of equipment and things, like again, you're 100 years of people that left everything, they just,
Right,
passed away.
Because if it's just your family and then the next generation moves in, no one ever cleans the house.
No, and I had the trunks that they came over from Europe in.
Oh, that's just so
And,
great.
and going through and finding like their and at that time, Poland was controlled by Russia on the eastern side. So all their passports and their documentation is Polish on Russian forms.
Yeah.
And so all of that it's really been fascinating. I even found I found my discharge from Sister Kenny's in 1951. So, I mean, it's amazing what you find, right? Yeah.
And I just think that psychologically it must be fascinating to like move back to the house that you grew up in, and how does that, like, I know that the landscape you talked about in your artist statement, that finding rocks, there's like lots of things about the landscape that you're in now has informed this body of work. But is there some sense of like, we talked a little bit last night about memory. Like you're in your childhood home now, and in this part of your life, like what is that like?
Well, it's been fascinating finding all this stuff because I didn't grow up with a phone.
Okay.
And so my mother was very, very close to her mother.
Yeah.
And they didn't live close to each other. So they wrote to each other probably twice a week.
Yeah.
And so I found boxes of my grandmother's letters to my mother.
Yeah.
And part of the thing that was really interesting to me is I never knew my mother as a woman. I just knew my mother as my mother. And I never realized, because my grandmother, and these letters are not short. They're like 5 or 6 pages, double-sided. And can you imagine doing that twice a week?
Wow.
And so it was really interesting. I never realized some of the unhappiness that my mother went through.
Yeah.
That her mother kind of counseled her through.
Yeah.
And my mother came from a family of 15 kids. So my grandmother was pregnant all the time.
Yeah.
So to come from such a large family. But that for me was probably, I don't know how it fits into memory, but it's been a real discovery process.
Yeah.
And the house, again, because it was built by my coal miner grandfather, it's like a Polish house. There's nothing square in it. And it's just a jungle of lumber.
Yeah.
They just use it.
Yeah.
And in the basement, and a lot of the stuff I've had to kind of redo, because it was intentionally, where I lived, there were a lot of natural artesianal springs. And it was built over a spring, and there was a cistern, a concrete cistern in the basement.
Yeah.
And then a discharge, and that's how they kept their milk and produce cold, just by the running water. And the original milk house was the same way.
Right.
It was built over the spring that just came up through the ground.
Yeah.
And again, the milk cans, because I think at that time, in the early 1900s, they had to take their cans to the train station.
Right.
And then they would go on a train to the creamery.
Okay.
Because no one had cars back then.
Yeah.
So I think it is that kind of jumble of discovery and memory. And just finding, like when I was a kid, I wasn't really mobile. So I did a lot of handwork. My grandma taught me how to do lace. So I made lace.
Yeah.
I did embroidery. I found all these things. And I made a lot of doll clothes.
Oh.
And I knitted dolls, and so it was kind of fun finding all my doll clothes and then sharing them with my daughter. So, but back, and a lot of it was just because I wasn't, super mobile.
Right. So is the studio in the barn?
The
In this wonderful barn,
oh my God, yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of times when I take photographs, now I take it against the walls, and the walls are stuccoed on the inside.
Yeah.
And I've left a lot of the stanchions in, and so I've kind of tried to make it into a workable space.
Yeah.
And then, so the barn, and I've tried to keep it just like the house, fixing some of the problems, like the water issues.
Yeah.
And then just realizing as I was redoing the house that, there was a fire in there one time.
Okay.
And so, just kind of that whole kind of discovery thing that you never realize.
Right.
It's, I think all of it, to me was kind of interesting is that when I was teaching at the Art Institute, and I think I shared this with you last night, we had a lot of Korean students, or people that were displaced, international students. And a lot of times, especially in grad school, they were dealing with memory in their work in some fashion. And I really could never really grab hold of that in terms of my own work.
Yeah.
Because I saw my work as always forward progressive, not backward looking.
Yeah.
And as I started to really delve into, again, my own medical history, and then dealing with this house and this farm and the barn, I thought, wow, memory is really powerful.
Yeah.
And it informs us at every step as we go forward, even if we, are really, even whether it's really at the surface and kind of, submerged.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that's a good, Well, I want to come and visit your farm. I'm going to come to visit your farm.
You should come. I welcome all of you. It's really neat. And I had a moment this summer. I was working in my garden. And I have, it's a little bit like a zoo. So I have this garden that's fenced in because, of deer. Do you have deer in Madison? They eat your garden. And so I have an 8-foot fence. And so I'm in there working. And I have Santos that come every couple of days. And they're usually a family pair, and they just kind of are oblivious to me. And I'm watching them going like, oh, you guys are so interesting. Yeah. And then I have a ring-tailed partridge family that come, and they have their own pathways, and certain times, like the partridges, partridge always come like in the early morning. The sandhills come later in the afternoon. I have trumpeters that build their nests, and so that's kind of my migrating species coming through. And people say, well, don't you have pets? And I go like, no. So anyway, I'm in my garden working, and I'm listening to this sound. And it's like a gurgling sound. And I'm like, what is that? And I keep thinking, and we just had one of these downpour rains. You get like 4 inches of rain in a day. Yeah. And so what I have in my hillsides are basically streams that come out of the sides of the hill, and they're kind of like a hose without a nozzle.
Okay.
So they just flow. And I'm thinking, oh my God, my springs are all flowing, and I've kind of built like a waterfall that they go down, and then the birds are singing, and so I videotaped it. I think I put it on my website. But I was like, this is, and all my prairie things and flowers are blossoming and sprouting. And I thought, my God, this is like, like heaven. How could you not? I looked out and I thought, my God, I am so incredibly blessed to be able to spend, like part of my life here in this moment, So, and so I guess that's how I feel. I feel like it's just really a blessing that I never realized it could be. I knew it was always a desire, but I didn't realize it would be a blessing.
Well, I think this is a perfect time to open it up to questions if anybody
you all
has
have my
any
address,
questions.
right? No, you should come. I have, it's
Yes.
a farmhouse, I have bedrooms upstairs. My plan is to have people come and stay with me and do art. And what I'm doing in the upper part of the barn is I've set up kind of a gathering space. And I'm taking the end of the barn that doesn't have, and dividing it into semi-private spaces. So in my rehab of the buildings, I've saved all the old doors, and I'm going to hinge them together. And then I'm going to take some of the furniture from the house that I'm not using and kind of create workspaces for people.
Nice.
And then people can kind of stay with me.
That's so nice.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's kind of the
Yeah.
point of the thing.
I think we all want to come.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah.
And what town do you live in?
Well, I don't live in a town, but my mailing address is Chetek. It's Chetek. It's on my website. And it's from Eau Claire. It's about 40, 45 miles north of Eau Claire.
Okay.
And Chetek is an old-fashioned resort community. So it has like 7, 8 lakes that are all naturally connected.
Now we want to come even more.
And it has these cabins. So, it was kind of really developed in the 50s and 60s, where people would vacation for a month. The mom would stay with the kids, they would go swimming every day, and the dad would come on the weekends and hang out with them. So there's all these resorts of these lakeside cabins.
Yeah.
And, old-fashioned kind of a lot of more log cabin, whatever. And again, and so it's about, so it's kind of like, and then I live about 8 miles, kind of northeast of Chetek, and it's right off of Highway 8. And Highway 8 is the last east-west highway that goes from one side of the state to the other. So it goes from Taylor Falls to Rhinelander. And on the other side of it and that's where the glacier ended.
Okay.
So there's some escapement and glacier forms, and also it's kind of like a tornado alley. So, and a lot of tornadoes follow the topography of the landscape, and so my property, since I've been, probably in the last 20 years, I've been hit 3 times by a tornado, with kind of varying degrees of damage. So, in fact, the last tornado was the EF3, which is a pretty super, high-level tornado. And some of the things that I did in my barn, like I have tin on them, and my father, I can't believe he did this, but when he was in his 80s, he went around the foundation. And what tornadoes do is they cause a pressure inversion. And so they literally lift buildings up off their foundations. And when they come down again, that's when they collapse. And so most barns, because of all the moisture from the cows, the sill plate is rocked out. So my dad went around this barn. Remember, it's like 40 feet high, 16 by 30. He jacked up and replaced the sill plate and then re-anchored it and rebolted it back down again. This is an 80-year-old.
Wow.
And so that's one of the things that saved my barn. The next thing I did is, again, if you look on my website and you look at photographs of the interior of the loft, the barn is built like has an internal buttress system like a Gothic cathedral. And what I did where every buttress was is I had the workers make brackets that went along, and then we put cable across with a come along, and we tightened it down. And when we were tightening it up, it was really amazing to see the structure just quivering.
Wow.
It was just like quivering. And I think in the last tornado, my barn is the only barn standing in about a 2-mile radius.
Wow.
And it was really painful to see all these barns taken down. But a lot of times, when you restore a barn, it's, first of all, it's really hard to find people to do that.
Right.
And it's also a commitment money-wise.
Right.
And so most people just let them, photograph them and just let them go down. Right. Because
They're not using them.
and there's, you put, let's say $100,000 into something that is just there for your visual pleasure, but if you have no purpose for it, And, you know, some of the barns are being saved now because they're wedding barns,
Right, yes.
right? And so you guys have questions for me? So yeah, do
Yeah.
contact me.
Yeah.
You can get my email address
Great.
from Teresa. And you come stay with
Yeah.
me.
Well, I'm gonna stop the recording,
Yes.
but we don't have to stop the conversation. So this show is up until February 22nd. It's so wonderful. But do just sit here and keep chatting with Dolores as long as you want. And you can plan your visits and find out more about Chautauqua.
Yeah, I should have brought some
Yeah.
cards, but I didn't.
Yeah.
But
Or,
if
yeah,
you have
it's on the
something-
website. If you need to, you can always contact the gallery for contact information.
Right, right.
Because I know I'm gonna plan it.
You guys should come.
I know, I'm gonna come.
You know what, and bring your husband because he's a
Yeah.
wood person.
Yes.
You know, some of the, because the way the barn was built is when they were clearing the land, they would cut the trees down.
Yeah.
And they would have a sawmill come down. And so some of my planking is this wide
Yeah,
because it's original,
right.
you know, original virgin growth.
Look at these floors.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same
Yeah.
type of thing.
Yeah,
It's like-
no, it's marvelous, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so Tim will have a great
No,
time.
he'll have a great time. Yes.
Deciphering it.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, guys.